Welcome, everyone. I'm presenting to one guy here. It's a very intimate session this evening here in Burlington. But tonight, we're going to take a look at this new preview product called Azure Developer CLI. So the things to think about are, as a developer, when you need to do or learn something new, how do you learn the new product or service? And of course, as a developer, how do you learn the pieces that you need to do it in the language that you choose to do it in? And then, of course, you're playing around with the product or service in Azure. How do you deploy that, configure it, and then, of course, how do you get your code out there? Because you need to get your app out running in the cloud. And then, of course, after you've got that figured out, you need the other aspects to it, which is really not really day two, because day two's the whole stuff after it goes to production, but the whole, let's develop this thing for real. So you need your infrastructure as code, and you need your CI/CD pipeline, and then of course you need a monitoring and observability. How do you learn that stuff? And often when a new product comes out, you'll be evaluating it, and you'll be doing one or two of these, not necessarily all of them, but every now and then you need to do all of them. So that's what we want to kind of look at tonight. So let's look at the landscape of learning stuff in Azure these days. There's quite a few options, quite a few places to find information that is relevant in some scenarios, but not in all scenarios of what we just looked at. So first thing everyone thinks of is your product documentation. That's where you'll find your quick starts, your how-to guides, your tutorials, the sort of stuff that'll walk you step by step through hello world stuff.
Someone's asking a question.
As well as, okay, let me check the questions here. As well as, let me check the questions here. Try to get the other. All right, cool, that's better. All right, so Teams.
Why don't you continue? Maybe he can ask it again.
Hey folks, John. Okay, so John's here. So John's actually here from the CLI team. So we'll have an expert actually answer some questions if anybody's got questions. So quick starts, that's where you often start off learning a product or technology, a new one. Like take for instance, Azure Container Apps. It just came out, just GA'd anyways. At what was it, Microsoft Build. So if you want to get up and run it on that, first thing you do is go to the product documentation and then learn it step by step. You start off with your hello world, and then you go into the features that you think are relevant to you. So that's where the how-to guides come in, and the tutorials will often come into scenario specific stuff. So let's, I guess, move on here. So Microsoft Learn is another place you would go to learn maybe a new technology. Like I don't even know if Container Apps is a good example yet. I'm not sure if they've got the learning path there yet. But if you're trying to learn a new technology and it gives you some context and a whole learning path to learn these technologies, and often some of them are developer related, so that it'll be language specific. It give you a lot of background on products and the relevant stuff, learning a path, not just a specific scenario or hello world. Then there's Microsoft Developer, which is kind of a level abstraction up. It gives you a kind of a landing page that organizes tools, documentation, samples. It kind of focuses you as a developer and gives you different ways to find things that be relevant to you as a developer. So those are some of the things that you might go to learn a new technology in Azure. But taking this a step further, so ways to learn about architecture and infrastructure, because not only do you need to learn the product, but you need to learn how to build the app and the architecture and design, all of that stuff. Start the recording, but then oh no. one man show's a little rusty here. Azure Architecture Center, that's where you will go to find the patterns and practices, the way that you should design your application when you really want to get something up and running in the cloud. And, you know, the right way to do identity, those sorts of things are going to be available in the Azure Architecture Center. And it goes into a lot more detail. I mean, even industry specific, like if you're in the financial industry, it gives
Sorry, where does it go in the Azure Architecture Center?
Yeah, the Azure Architecture Center is one location you can learn patterns and practices about Azure. So we haven't got to the main show for this evening, but these are ways that you would learn about different aspects of an application that you would want to get up and run in Azure. There's also the quick start templates. That's where you would go if you want to find a specific way to do ARM template. So how would you configure a firewall settings and front door? You'd be able to find an ARM template to do that in Azure Quick Starts. And the key thing about Azure Quick Starts, why it's even on this list, is oftentimes you'll learn the product, you'll get it figured out through the Azure portal, but then you need to do the infrastructure's code. So it's like, how do you get to that step? One way, of course, is to export it in the portal, but another option when you need to find specific scenarios is this quick start template location. And then there's this lesser known product called Azure DevOps Starter, which I've shown in my Azure Kubernetes talk, because it does a fantastic job about walking you through sample apps code, the infrastructure running in Azure, the build pipeline that builds the code, and the release pipeline that sticks it into the infrastructure in Azure. And it gives you a monitoring dashboard as well. I think it's a fantastic tool. I wish they would have made it pluggable. Allegedly, they have made it so that you can bring your own code. I've not actually done that demo to get it in, to get my own code up and running. But to the best of my knowledge, they don't give you the ability to provide your own bicep files to customize the resources in Azure that you want. So that's where I think the Azure Developer CLI really fills a need for me, is it gives me what the Azure DevOps Starter did not give me. It gives me the ability to plug my own code in really easy, and it gives me the ability to put whatever bicep files in there to create the resources in the configuration that I need in Azure. The great thing is they've given you some sample apps that allow you to get something up and running relatively quickly, much like the DevOps Starter did. But the drawback to the DevOps Starter was it was a pretty simple Hello World app that it deployed, and there wasn't any best practices involved in that. But with the Azure Developer CLI, they've gone the other route. They've put in a lot of the best practices, and they've given you that level of sample app that's a real app. It's a web app UI. It's, well, most of them. The to-do app that we'll look at is a React front end, and it calls an API that runs in the back end, which uses the Cosmos database on for storage persistence, which is a real application. It's not just this web HTML page that's really easy to deploy. So it gives you more of that closer to production sample that you can get to a POC that you can modify in your own production scenario pretty quick. So that's what we're going to be looking at this evening, is this ability to help you get an app out and running in Azure a lot faster than those other resources that we showed on the previous 2 pages. So before I get started, are there any questions? So Azure Developer CLI and tools. There is the AZD, which is the command line utility tool. And then there is the Visual Studio extension, which provides all of the functionality that the AZD command line tool does. And they're starting to integrate the functionality into Visual Studio 2022. You can currently turn it on in the preview edition of that. But I won't be showing the Visual Studio this evening, but I will be showing the Visual Studio code. So once you download and install the AZD command line tool, you'll get, you type it out, you'll get this screen that shows you the main commands that you'll be using. So deploy is going to be the way that you would deploy this template that you've got on your machine. I guess it's really difficult to go in the order that the alphabetic order they have it in, because it's not really the mindset that I have whenever I'm utilizing this tool. So, but I guess since it's in this order, let's go in this order. So the deploy would be what you would use to deploy the template out into Azure. So it's going to do the build. If it's going to Container Apps, it's going to do the Docker build so that it can then push that up to Azure. Down, so AZD down is going to pull down the application. It is the reverse of up. Up is the single command that you can get your template up and running in Azure. It will initialize the template. It actually does multiple commands. So it will do the initialize, which pulls the template down, gets it ready on your machine, asks you a few things necessary to deploy it in Azure, like what do you want to call this environment? What location do you want it to go to? And then what subscription do you want it to go to in Azure? So that would be the init. So the up runs 3 commands. It goes init, gets everything ready on the machine, and then the provision, which will deploy the Azure resources and get those running and materialized in Azure. And then it will do the deploy. So then it'll push the code up or build the code and push the code up into Azure. So that up command has the reverse down. So that's where we were. The env will show you the environment variables that are being used for the build, actually for interacting with the command line tool. So I can show you that a little later. Help will display this screen, or if you say AZD, one of the commands, and then help, it will give you additional information about the commands. Infrastructure or infra, I should say, will help you either create or delete the infrastructure that you have out in Azure. I mentioned init, it will set up the template. Login allows you to log into Azure, so you wouldn't have to actually go through AZ to log in. Monitor is a part that will allow you to see like log analytics, app insights, dashboards, those sorts of things. Pipeline, which I'll get to in my last demo, will show you how to get the CI/CD wired up in GitHub for a template. Provision, that's an alias for the infra. So that's what that will actually, it's an alias for the infra create. It will provision your resources out in Azure, so materialize those. Restore is just to restore the dependencies for your template. Template, you can list out your templates with that keyword, and then of course up in version. So that's the quick overview of what we're going to be looking at. So now let's see if I can get out of PowerPoint and show you what we've got here. So. Let's do a demo first. We'll say mkdir. Okay. Hope I haven't used this before. All right, so we'll say AZD, like I showed. That outputs the options that you have, or the command, the commands you have. So let's see what we have for templates. So we say AZD template list. So there's an existing list of templates. You can create your own. You can put them in GitHub. You can utilize other people's, but these are the ones that are tied into the command line at the moment. I'm going to do the C# one. If you're utilizing the templates from Azure Samples, you don't have to type in the Azure Samples /, so I can say AZD, go straight up, and to do, actually, you know what? Let me do a init so we can talk about it when it's going up.
But you have to log in first, right? Where did you How did you do the login?
I'm most likely already logged in, but we can try that. So AZD. Log in. So you can see it's integrated. I didn't have to go.
So if it was
Use
like
device.
Linux or something like that, right? It gives you the code, right? So how do you do that? Just now it's fine because you're on Windows, right?
Correct. And what I'm showing tonight is only on PowerShell.
Okay.
I don't have it running on the Linux right now. So I would have to test that one. So it's coming back. It takes a few seconds. So you see, I didn't have to go to AZ to log in, so I didn't have to go to the Azure command line to log in myself. So we'll go, so AZD, init, template, and the name I want is to do C#, because I'm a C# guy, or the node. So what that is doing is, because I only did init, is it's going out to, or it has already gone out to GitHub, pulled the template down, and is asking me, okay, what do you want to call this? I'm going to call it MBA. And you'll see where
create a resource group called NBA Demo 1.
it'll use that as part of the resource creation name. You'll see that soon. So I've gone with East to US, and then I'll go with that subscription. So what it does is it creates a file. So let's look at, see what it actually, let's kick this off first. So AZ, let's do it step by step. So AZD provision. So what I'm going to do, I pulled the template down and we'll look at the template while it's provisioning because it'll take a few minutes to provision. So there's our provision. So let me open the demo. Daily demo 1. So this is, let me put this. Okay, so this is the template. This is what a template looks like. So interesting things about the template. Looks like I need to. So let's look at the Azure. This is pretty interesting. So I called it, so it asked me what environment name I wanted to give it. If you look at this config.js, you'll see this is where the default environment name is. The first location. Then you'll notice that there's this directory with that same name. And then there is a env file, which holds the stuff relevant for deploying the resources like it's currently doing in my CLI at the moment. So it has the name of the environment, has the location, the principal that it's using to do the deploy, and then the subscription ID to put the resources in. Then here are the parameters that are going to be passed. So that's the Azure folder. I'm not going to get into the dev container because I don't know anything about it. GitHub, I'll get to that later. In a later demo, VS Code doesn't really show us much relevant. It's just some config files. Assets, so the assets are what is used for this markdown file. So let me show you a markdown file because I didn't show you this on GitHub. So more screen real estate. So this is a description of what this template does, what it should look like whenever it's working, what any prerequisites are, how to, links to install those prerequisites. And then it pretty much walks you through. So the AZD up is the fast way, just to get it going. It'll deploy the resources out in Azure and deploy the code with just that one command. It gives you a little more information about what the environment name means, the location, the subscription, that sort of thing. And then the results of the AZD up will be the URLs coming back. Let me show you. So this is the more relevant stuff, because I'm looking at this as a learning tool, but also a utility I can use to deploy code. This is the application architecture. So for this sample, what it's doing is it has a node UI that's going to be deployed in one Azure app service. One Azure app service web app, sorry, there's an additional part to that sentence. And then a C# Azure web app. Both of those are going to be deployed in the same app service. There's going to be a key vault that's used to handle the key secret to log into the storage, which is going to be a Cosmos database. And then there's also some app insights dashboard as well as log analytics. And the API is the one that utilizes the secrets from Key Vault to access the storage. So it's got really quite a few pieces to this simple web app that you can get up in, not a simple web app, a simple sample up and running in a matter of minutes by typing one command. So there's quite a bit here. And there's more in this markdown here, but that is what is in the assets folder here. As we're looking through what we have. So the infra is going to be the bicep files. The main bicep files, typically the one that's going to be started to kick off the deployment, or not deployment, the provisioning or the infrastructure create. The main in this one calls the resources, and that's where the majority of the resources are. Not all of them, which I'll show you. So this has, as you can see, the web is the Node.js front end for this sample. The API is the C# backend for the sample. Those are going to be two different web apps, and then one single app service for those to run in. And then there's a log analytics workspace and an app insights. But the app insights is in this bicep, and it's quite long for the dashboard, more or less. So see, the dashboard goes from 18 to 1200. So that's all stuck in this one. Yeah.
That's a lot.
But it does, the dashboard does quite a bit. So we'll have to open it up and take a look at it. But that's it. I mean, this is the one thing that the Azure DevOps starter app wouldn't do. I couldn't plug in my own biceps. So if I wanted to wrap anything in a VNet, I couldn't wrap it in a VNet if the sample didn't let me do so. So this capability to plug in your own infrastructure is really, really cool. And then under the SRC folder, under the source folder, is the source code. So you have the C# web app under the API, and then the Node web app under the web, and everything that's needed to build that. I'll get more to the other files. Let's check and see how our deployment's going. Okay, so it's not a deployment yet, sorry. It is a provisioning. So now let's look at Azure and see what was created. We'll open the portal and see what resources were created for. I call it J. Haley, or NBA actually. So let's look for a resource group named NBA. So NBA demo 1 right here. So you can see it used the environment name for the resource group. And you can see it adds a token on the end of the resources so that it has a unique name. So this is what was created by just that one command, azd provision. So it created the two web apps. It created the app insights, that dashboard, Cosmos DB, the log analytics, and the service plan, which is quite a number of resources. So now let's do a deploy. So azd deploy. So since the context of where I'm at is inside of the template, is going to build the source directory and deploy that. build it, package it, deploy it. And since I'm doing a web app, it doesn't need to use Docker on this one, but if I'm using container apps, it would need Docker installed on my machine. So this will take a little while. We'll move on to the next. Actually, let me show you the Azure YAML file. That's the one thing we didn't really look at. Kind of important here. So this is what the Dev CLI uses to determine what it's going to be building and packaging and deploying. It's the services, more or less. So we have the web is a project, and it's going to use the dist build. It's JavaScript or TypeScript if you look at it, and it's going to be hosted in app service. The API at this location is C# language, and we didn't tell it anything about the DISG. So if question.
Well, that's going to be my question is what's the dist for the second one?
Yeah, the dist means a copy of the files, my understanding, versus this one we're going to do a build and publish. So because this is a Node.js application. Okay. So are you familiar with like Node.js and React and
Only vaguely.
so typically they'll go through a build process. The TypeScript application will go through a build process, create a dist folder. That's the distributable files, more or less, and then that's what gets copied over.
Okay.
That's my understanding. I could be wrong on that.
You're right.
Am I right?
Okay, cool, thanks. So you're sort of saying for the Node.js app, put your
Yeah, the assets that we want deployed are going to end up in this build folder.
Okay.
And then with the C#, it knows how to build it, and it will publish those. But with TypeScript, JavaScript stuff, it could be about anywhere. It may not be the same as C# standard, but TypeScript, it could be Angular, it could be React, it could be Vue. So they're all slightly different. That's the way that I've understood it to work. Let's see if it's done.
Yeah. Somebody's asking a question on the top.
Let's see. All right, so what do we have? This is the name of the folder where AZD needs to look to find the packaged app to deploy. Okay, so that's what you want to shove out to the production servers, what's in that dist. Okay, yeah, I was going to show the schema. I've got the link here. So I showed you the Azure YAML file, but what are the possible values in that YAML file? So that's what the schema is. Okay, so the important stuff is this. So what are your options where you can deploy this? The example we're looking at right now goes to app service, but you can go to container app, you can go to function, and you can go to a static web app. So that's the target resources that you can send it to for their current setup. And then the languages, .NET, C#, F#, Python, JS, and TS. So and if it's container app, then you can have some additional stuff about the Docker portion of it. That's pretty much the piece of not a lot there. Yeah, so that's that YAML file and what could be in it more or less. So let's see if it's deployed. Fetching endpoints for the app server. So it's out there. Let's go take a look at it. So now let's go to the web app. And go to the URL. So things to look at here. So this is the to-do app. It's loading, which is cool. So let's look at the list here. Let's say demos. Demo. I want to do an AZD demo 2. And we'll do the remoting onto the other machine. My typing speed's off. Okay, so we've got 3 items in our to-do list. And sorry, you probably can't read that. Let me pump that up. So we've got 3 items in the to-do list. This is a React application. It's calling another API. If I look at the network, you'd be able to see that it calling the API. It's on a public endpoint, with it then going to the Cosmos database. So let's look at that Cosmos database to prove that everything's making it to the far end of the app. Just because I like to do that. So let's go to resource group, jump to the Cosmos app here.
So is it like $20 for each Cosmos DB is like $20 or something like the minimum, right?
I don't know.
I know you're an MVP, so bill does not matter, but for the common man,
I don't keep things up and running, so I don't honestly know. The template, I think, has billing information in it. I'll have to look. I'm not sure if it's still there. Okay, so this is what's stored in the Cosmos database right now. So this is AZ Demo 1, AZ Demo 2, and then the custom templates. So the stuff that I typed in on the React UI made it to the API and then onto the Cosmos database. So the template works. I mean, all of those Azure resources were, like magically deployed out there. So that's, let's look at let's try this to AZD. I didn't do an overview. I'm not sure if it'll work. So the dashboard, I've had some luck with opening up and it actually having something. It all depends. All right, cool. So here's our dashboard. Well, it's not really our dashboard. This is just our app insights. So let me go to the dashboard. That's really kind of what I want to show you the dashboard. Oh, great. So I found that you really do want to more or less navigate by resource group when you have too many demos up. So let's go to the dashboard. So this is the dashboard. This is why it was like 1,200 lines of configuration. And I just added 3 items, so there's really not a lot for it to go off of. And it may not be, anyways, but we'll come back and check on this. But you can see there's a lot of tiles and a lot of stuff configured in that one little bicep file. All right, so back to the presentation here. So we were at the first demo. So we manually went through the init, provision, and deploy. We didn't do the AZDO. We'll do that a little later. So this is the current list of application templates. If you go to GitHub and look at them, you'll see, actually, let me show you the first view of it. Actually, I've got the link. So this very first link will take you to the Developer Hub. This is where you'll find, actually, a lot of the links I have on that page go to. So this is where you can find out how to use it, how to get the requirements installed for it, the prereqs. But here's the templates that I want to show you. So it's a lot like the Azure DevOps in the way the Azure DevOps starter was you choose, say, ASP.NET or .NET Framework, and then you choose ASP.NET Core or ASP, and then you choose where you want to target it. Do you want it to go to a VM? Do you want it to go to AKS? Those sorts of things. So with their applications, they've got it broken down by the languages right now. So the to-do app, you can do it for a Mongo. Well, they're all Mongo for Node.js and Python. C# is the SQL. So they all use Cosmos database on the back end. I guess that's the important thing. So the Node.js, you can send it to or have the target resource be an app service, which is what we just did. Or you could do a containers app or container app. Or you can do a static web app with a Azure Functions backend, which is a configuration I've not explored myself. Python, you have the same choices. With C# right now, they only have the app service deployment with the Cosmos DB.
Can you click on the Python one again?
Which one?
Okay, right.
Okay. Yeah, so you get three options on this one. I will show you my template where I've got it going to an app service and a container app for the API. So I'll show you that one. Kind of back to this. So this is the site where you'll want to go to get started with everything. So the getting started will give you all the links that you want or need to develop it. I've done the bare metal one. I have not tried the dev container. Dev container options are there too. That was, again, that's the templates. So we saw this first one, the Cosmos SQL, but let's go do a different one. VS Code, and all right, so let's look at, we've already kind of looked at VS Code too, so my demo order's off a little bit, but let's do something else. So let's get out of here. Let's go to mine. It's 7 o'clock, so we're doing perfectly fine on time. So let me show you mine, and then we'll get into how you can create your own. So GitHub. And mine's a little old, so I need to go back through it and make sure it's all up to date with the public preview. So this one right here. So the README is only accurate down to, say, the diagram. The rest of it may or may not be accurate. So let me see if I can. Let me open it here, because this is pretty much all we need. So this is the idea of this template and demo that I want to get into is to show you that you can create your own and completely change the way that the components that they've given you to utilize can be rearranged the way that you want them to. So I did utilize pretty much their same code. I took the Node JS React application and pretty much created the React application template that Visual Studio gives you, copied over the React files, and then that worked. I needed to change the API so that it would call a controller on that ASP.NET application, not the API directly like their template does, or like their sample does. Because I wanted to do this. I wanted to wrap the API inside of a VNet so that it's not accessible outside to the outside internet. So that's what this diagram shows. So you've got the web app, which is pretty much their web app. The API is pretty much their code. I just wrote a bunch of different bicep so that you have the container app inside of a network. It uses a private DNS so that it can access it via the web app, uses VNet integration to get to the container app. The container registry just shows you that it's container. The container app needs to grab a container. And then Cosmos. So some of the things that could be improved here is a private link, a private endpoint for the container registry, and same thing for Cosmos. And then it'd be pretty secure at that point. I just haven't got time. I just haven't had the time to get to that. So this is a public repo. And let me copy this. And you can utilize it from your own environment because it's a public repo. I show you. Copy this. Go to here as AZD. Up -- I do template, sorry, template. Okay, so what that's going to do is it's going to come back and say, hey, what do you want to call this environment? I'm going to say MDA demo 2. Going to ask me where do you want to put it? And then it's going to ask me what subscription. Somehow it knows what I'm going to answer. And then it's going to pull my template down from GitHub because I gave it the URL that it basically needed. And then it's going to initialize it, create those resources, run those bicep files up in Azure, and then build the Docker container on my machine for the container app, package the web app, and then deploy that up into Azure after the resources are done. It's going to take a little while. I won't make you wait. I can show you what it looks like.
No, Azure seems to be really slow compared to AWS, at least when it comes to like container apps.
I don't know. I haven't. I have nothing to compare it to. So this is the application that I deployed yesterday. I do need to. I'll show you the code, but as you can see, the private DNS zone. I've not fixed the bicep file to actually use the naming standard. So I need to modify my bicep. So there's still some stuff I need to do with this template, but it proves the point that, you know, this wasn't, the private DNS isn't in any of their canned samples. The dashboard is directly theirs. App Insights, I think everything else is pretty much directly theirs, except for the VNet stuff. So there's a VNet at the bottom. The web app settings are different because it has to do the integration with the VNet. So if I go to the web app and I go to...
Can you go to the web app and see what you have configured as just to...
Yeah. What would you like to see, the networking?
No, I want to see like what plan have you chosen for that?
Good question.
To get an idea of how expensive it is.
That's a B1. So it's a basic. It's not a very expensive one.
Okay.
The Cosmos, I don't know. Cosmos is probably a cheaper one too. But if you go to the networking,
Networking won't be much because it's hardly, you know, any traffic coming in and out.
cost-wise, yeah, but the integration or the configuration is different. So it's set up to do VNet integration, where that demo that I showed you with the Node.js wasn't. It was just public.
So, I mean, does that mean that your web app is not available to the internet, or that your web app can access resources in that VNet?
It's basically setting up a VPN to my VNet from my web app.
Yeah.
So my web app can call into a VNet. Cool. Yeah. So and if you look at the VNet integration, if I go to the container apps, container app environment, because I think that's where the network and stuff is.
So why, just out of curiosity, why didn't you consider using ACI, Azure Container, whatever?
Instances?
Yeah.
For the proof of concept I'm working on is a client wants to start breaking their monolith into microservices.
Got it.
And they want those microservices to be wrapped into VNet. They don't want them publicly available. So in order to have multiple microservices, the container apps is the perfect service for that. Versus ACI, you have to do a lot more care and feeding. It's not really designed for that. So let's see if I can find.
But the app still has to be publicly accessible. But the front end of the app is still publicly accessible.
Absolutely,
It's just
yeah.
AWS traffic is not.
Yeah, because right now what they have is they have this. It's a layered application, but it's a big web app. We change one little thing, we had to push the whole web app out.
Yeah.
Versus, you know, instead of say an order service and you add address to line, you know, where you can just update that service versus push the whole app out.
Okay.
So that's the idea. That's the proof of concept I was working with. So if I go to, forgive me, I forget where.
Go to the resource groups on the top and then it'll show Cosmos, right?
You want to look at the Cosmos? Cosmos is Cosmos is the exact same template that they use in their sample. I know you're asking about the cost. I don't know what this is costing. It's not doing much of anything.
Wow, 800 RUs here, it is going to cost you something. It's like what, if you keep it on more like $100 a month.
Yeah, I'll tear it down after this. Actually, I can show you how we can tear it down pretty easy. That's another thing. So see, it's still cranking on the resources. Once this comes up, I can show you how to tear that down, because that's the other flip side to getting into new technologies. Like, great, you get this up and running. If it's costing you $100 a month, well, you know, that's not something you want to find out at the end of the month.
Yeah.
Well, and I totally agree. For any sort of testing and dev, the ability to tear it down is almost better than the ability to stand it up, because you can tear it down and then you can work out how to do it again, tear it down quickly. So I think tear down's a super valuable part of tools like AZD.
Yeah, once this comes up, I'll show you the down.
Just out of curiosity, right, Jason, I know you're a big Azure person and all that.
Yeah.
But did you, like, when you're working with your clients, do some of them ask you to use Terraform instead so that?
I haven't used Terraform.
Okay.
The majority of actually all of my clients right now are pretty small. So it's basically up to me and what I want to use. Terraform is very popular, and they do want to extend this to use Terraform. So that is on there.
What I like about Terraform is, right, you can, there are even things for Azure and of course AWS is there,
Right.
but it gives you the end state, right?
Does it?
Yeah. So what I mean, suppose you're doing like like just now, this is fine for hobby, right? In which you can tear up the whole thing, bring it up and tear it down. But in production, that's not the case, right? You need to write a script that, if this is existing, to get to the end state, what do I need to do, right? You can't just go and take a storage, container like a ADLS Gen 2 and just knock it off. Yeah.
Everything's situational.
Yeah.
That's exactly true. I worked in 2 companies which use Terraform, one bigger, one smaller. And for the small company, sometimes Terraform is a disaster. You have to have a dedicated resource which is sitting on supporting this Terraform as your environment evolves. And it gives you more trouble than it's worth. So Jason is right. Everything is situational.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I'm a Terraform user also, but I use it more for standing up infrastructure, like you said, defining the end state, but then pulling it down. Because
Exactly.
if I leave something running for a couple of days, it will change outside of the source, and then my Terraform is kind of useless because I can try and delete it, but it might error out because something has changed
Because
outside
state
of
is
Terraform.
not kept in
And
state.
it's very difficult to keep state, even if we're 100% strict on rules about not making changes outside of Terraform, as you know. It's great for application state, but not so much for like infrastructure.
But even
configuration
in
state.
AZD, unless he does a delete of resource group, you're in the
Agree.
same situation,
I
right?
agree, yeah.
Because his bicep file will be out of sync and the
Yeah,
stack
looks
will
like it's a
not
great
be.
command line tool, yeah.
I mean, how does it keep the concept of the stack in the, like you have these various components? Is it persisted anywhere or it's just?
Well, with the resources that the AZD deploys, they're all in one resource group.
Oh, that's how it
So
does.
if you tear it down, it's going
Just
to be
kill the resource group.
And then what would happen if you were to, and this happens with Terraform all the time. So you create your templates, you run AZD and deploy, and then you edit your templates, and then you run AZD delete. But AZD doesn't have state held locally, or maybe it does. It doesn't sound
No,
like
it
it does.
doesn't.
Which means that it has to delete based on a template, but the template that it's deleting based on is different from what was deployed. So if you've changed the name of a resource, it's not going to be able to delete that resource. That's one of the things I think you have to live with. Like I don't know that this tool is aimed for production
No, it
operations.
is.
I mean, I
It
realize
is
I got here
actually, I think
late.
it is.
It is.
Wait, I guess I'm not understanding the scenario. So run that by me again. So you deploy something and then you modify the bicep.
No, let's give you a real example, right? Suppose I have an application which has one storage container, one Cosmos DB, Docker, Docker app in Node and Node and React frontend. Okay, just don't take it literally, just for example.
Yeah.
Now what happens is I'm having like in the storage container, I have certain paths which I'm persisting some assets. Okay. In Cosmos DB, I have some, I'm using the Mongo, collections basically. And, like your, some similar to your to-do app.
Yeah,
Don't take
yeah,
it
so you've got data persisted
in Cosmos DB and the heavy stuff like the pictures, etc.,
Yep.
are stored in the Gen 2. Okay, so that's fine. So we go through the ARM, AZD, and you deploy. Okay, using your bicep file.
which are two different things, because the bicep files will create the infrastructure, but it won't put the assets or the data in.
No, hang on. So the first time you'll just take your bicep file and use AZD and deploy.
Yep. Okay,
Okay,
got me there. Got me.
all right. Now what happens is some business changes or requirements come in which I need to make some additions like more collections or add some more properties within a collection. And I need to add some more parts on the storage Gen 2. Okay. And I have to do something on the node and the container application. For the node in the container application, I need to tear it down and bring it up. Okay. For the Cosmos DB, I have to do some, like what you call alters on the collection. Okay, and storage container, I can't delete it, right? It's got too much data, so I need to add a path. So now what will happen is you have your bicep container. It got the high level top level items correctly, got it. But your node application, you do not know what it is. I mean, you do know what you deployed, but now you made the changes, what surgical you need to do, like an upsert.
So,
Jason, can I help?
yeah, go for it.
All right. So the scenario that was just described is a very valid, normal DevOps infrastructure as code scenario. That's not what this tool is for. And my product group colleagues here can correct me if I'm wrong. Think of this more like as a developer whiteboard, where you sketch out what you're doing, you put it out there, you see if it works. And the idea here with this, whatever the down was, is to just basically delete the entire resource group, delete everything, and start and redeploy it with your next iteration. Now, of course, in a production environment, that's not useful, but that's not the use case that this tool was built for. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but it's interesting because in the dev world, we get into a lot of people will build, for instance, a Azure DevOps pipeline that deploys the infrastructure and then pushes the code. And then that doesn't make a lot of sense in the production world because you only want to push the code. You don't want to keep pushing. And the reality is you wind up breaking up your data tier, winds up being more or less in one deployment, your infrastructure is in another one, and the code comes down a different path. Because you really do, for exactly that reason, you can't blow you can't blow a database away, you can't blow a whole storage account away. You only need to modify them. So, but that is absolutely not what this tool is built to do. This is for developers to experiment and learn how to do things with Azure.
They're ready to start using it for production already.
Who is?
These guys, they're poking holes in it. Why can't you use it in production?
Right, because it's not a production tool. That's what Azure CLI is for, and other tools. And
yes,
like I've got people here from the product group if they want to speak up and correct anything if I've created a misconception. I'm going to assume if they're quiet that I've probably hit the target.
So it should be deployed at this point.
So is there any chance of you have the Visual Studio Copilot? Like I can just put in like for C#, just put the comment, give me a function which does this. So can it like simulate like that? If I just say, hey, give me a thing with this, and it just writes the bicep code. which I can use in Azure.
This will run the bicep code for you. It won't do what you're asking for. It's not a bicep code writer.
Yeah, but I'm
And
just asking.
Copilot's not, yeah, Copilot doesn't have enough input data to actually even attempt to do that.
Oh, okay.
I have issues with deploying Cosmos at the moment in my subscription. So nonetheless, that's why I have the canned one that I.
The demo gods got you, huh?
Yeah. But this is the exact same code that I deployed yesterday. And you can see all the resources are there.
Maybe you can just kill the whole resource and start again.
Let's just kill it. Let's see. Let's go do AZ down. So you can see resources were created. So that was this one. And there is a bug in my template because I didn't do the dash RG, but these are the resources that were created tonight. The NBA demo 2. The one I created yesterday was this J Haley P demo RG. This is what we were looking at a little earlier with the settings on the web app and all that. I have had problems with the templates whenever Cosmos, for some reason, isn't spinning up in East 2. Often if I change it to just East, the East Coast one, it will work.
Yeah, it's like oversubscribed. It's a bad
Yeah, I was
idea.
going to say, we may be resource constrained in East 2.
So let's just tear this down. So I'm telling it to do AZ down. So it should remove.
AZD down?
Sorry. Yeah, you're right. AZD down. AZD down. That's going to remove these. And this resource group will go with. So we'll come back to that. So that was my custom template that you can actually create. I need to fix some things in it and add some stuff to it to make it more complete. But it's available if you guys want to play with it. So now let's look and see what it would take to do your own. I've kind of got some points here. It's easiest if you already have your bicep files. So what we'll do is we'll do a quick demo. So the demo here is to show you how to do your own web. I'm going to do a web application. I'm just going to open up Visual Studio, select the default web application, make sure it works locally, and then we'll put it into a template and show you that I can AZD up and have it deployed to a web app. But since I'm not going to go through creating the bicep files, we'll take what that first demo was, and then we'll just trim stuff out of it that we don't need.
All right.
So let's go to Visual Studio first.
Can you zoom it out, and is it possible to close this slide, this top light here?
I think so. The lighting controls are in the back. They're not up here. These are just the.
Okay, leave it. I don't want to. If you can just zoom out a little bit your screen.
Yeah, I can zoom out.
Hey, Jason, how many people do you have in the room now?
We have 2 people.
Okay. Twice as many as at the beginning.
Yeah, we got 2 rooms joined here.
50% growth.
There you go. No, that's 100% growth, isn't it?
100% growth, yes. So where are you from, Mark? In Cambridge or in Seattle?
I'm in Boston.
Okay.
Where do you work?
I work from home.
Okay. All right. So you're an independent?
No, I work for a small company.
Okay. And you're doing DevOps now?
Yeah, we are using Azure DevOps, yes.
Okay.
I work for F5. Know them?
F5. Okay. Yeah.
NGNX, right?
And Nginx, yeah, F5 and Nginx. And yeah, I would say probably maybe more than 50% of my customers are Azure users. So I'm probably in Azure, every single day. But it's always nice to stay ahead of these things.
Let me go back to Visual Studio. I create just a ASP.NET Core app. Next. a demo 3, I only created directory at the moment. So I'm gonna put this
So is
in
the
here.
cloud really killing you guys or not really?
No, next. This is just the demo. We don't really care.
You're not doing a container deployment here, right?
We're not, no.
Okay, okay.
Try to make it simple. So actually, that's one thing I didn't show. So Docker.
Could add Nginx right there.
Yeah. So this was the demo that I was trying to deploy. I created it yesterday, so image was already created. I guess it doesn't do a build if the image is already there.
Not supposed to.
Now, Visual Studio, are you done? All right, so here's our app, verify it works. So the idea with this one is we create a template, we AZD up it, so it puts it out in Azure, deploys it, and then we're going to create the CI/CD at GitHub.
So you're going to create a GitHub action?
Yep.
That's cool.
So that is the code. I put it in the directory that we need it in. So let me open this on one side, this on the other. So let's pick any demo. We did. So where did I put this? AH demo. AH demo. Okay, so this was our original one. So this has pretty much what we're going to need. So we're going to AZ dev, and I called that one MB demo 3. We only have the source directory. What was our question?
Nope, nope. I was just confirming what you were thinking there. I'll mute.
I like his avatar, right?
We don't need that.
The hat and the.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm told it looks just like me. Without the gray hair.
So where is this AZ CLI dev team? Is it in Nerd or is it in Seattle? In Seattle?
It's going to be.
You guys in Seattle?
No, we are in Burlington. The
Okay.
office in Burlington.
Okay.
We are mostly in Seattle, but it's really, virtual team all over the company.
We're going to take everything in that original demo except for the source. Try this. All right, so I didn't do a copy, which I would have done, but it doesn't matter for these purposes. We've got all those files over here now. So this is the demo folder I just created. Let me open this in code. So this. That good?
That's good.
So this is the one. If I look at the source folder, you'll see we only have web. This is where I've got the solution folder, and I don't know that that's going to. This is the page that we just created. If you look at it, it's going to be our welcome message. So something simple. We'll change that once we get it out into GitHub. So what we want to do now is go to the info folder. Resources. We're going to remove basically anything that has to do with the API. So let me shrink these. Collapse them, I should say. Here's an API. We don't need the API. Service plan, we need that. Log analytics, we'll leave that. We don't need anything to do with Cosmos. That. We remove the API, we're just doing a simple this, this. So we're pretty much just left with a web app, app insights, log analytics, that sort of thing. And let's see, there's something on main I believe we need to remove. So we remove Cosmos stuff, remove the API stuff. I believe that's all we need. So that's pretty much going to be the bicep that we would need to just deploy a web app.
Wow, that's not a lot.
So now let's go, let's try the app or the extension. So control, Azure, let's see if this works. I typically use the command line. So I believe it's all set up on my machine. Oh, this is going to be a problem though.
So can you upload the file using AZD or you have to use that AZ?
I tried to cancel out of it. I'm not sure if it worked or not. So I didn't remove the environment. So we don't want the existing environment. So let's delete that stuff. Actually, let's just now we want it to do all brand new stuff for us. Well, it didn't ask us for an environment name because I didn't delete the first demo stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to call this one in a demo 3. Echoes the environment. Asks me where. Let's try east. Look best. I guess it doesn't matter since it's just doing the web app. Description. So since it's just a web app, it's not going to take terribly long to do this. But as it's doing it, try to, okay, so it's starting to create the resources. Let's try to do 2 things at once. This is what we just did, 635, that's about right. So let's go ahead and say AZD. Deck, what's the name? I'm going to do AZD pipeline config. This is like magic to me, which is AZD pipe. Yes, let's go ahead and create one, please. Create a new private GitHub repository. That sounds good to me. So it's now going to create a new repo in GitHub for me and upload the code for me. And the one thing I didn't dig into is the code. So it's still creating resources. If you go to the GitHub folder, this is the workflow that is going to basically tell GitHub to say, hey, you know, this is AZD. Go ahead and build it. You know how to do this stuff. Take over from here. And then tie it into GitHub Actions for us. Okay, so would you like to commit? Yes, I would. That's pushing up to GitHub. Okay, now this is still deploying, right? So it's created the Azure. Okay, I got an error packaging the service. Oh yeah, sorry, I did forget that. So at this point it's done the initialize. It's done the provision of resources, but it's choking on the deploy because I left this in. Say, hey, wait, there is no API guy. You left something out. Oh wait, hold on. I actually want to move this up. We used the .NET project. I called it web, so it's under web. It's C#, and I want to go to web app. So now, if I go down here, since I kind of broke it in the middle, let's say Azure Developer Deploy. So if we go to Azure Resource Groups, fresh, free. So there's our website, apps, insights, plan, log analytics. So the guts of our resources are here. Go to the web app. Publishing it. So once this gets done publishing it, then I'll be able to navigate to it and we'll just see that template. And then the next thing we can do is go to GitHub, change some text, and then commit that, and then watch it go through the action and then push it out to the website. Done. So if I go to this endpoint, it's ASP.NET. There's a startup. So we have welcome. It appears that I messed up the CSS somehow, but the file is there. Okay. Okay, so now let's go to GitHub. One, so NBA demo 3, private repository. So here's all of our code. It was the template, so it's got the inaccurate README there. But let's go into the web. Pages, index. Let's change this text. I mean, ideally, I would be doing this via get, not through here. Welcome. This. All right, so now let's go back and look at our actions. Okay, so here's this one failed it. It's not cool. So it updated this one. Let's see if we can find any information. May end up breaking it again. Process complete extension code. Bummer. We broke. Actually be all right for us. I didn't clean everything out. If this one succeeds, or see if enough of the steps succeed that it will replace this message. But nonetheless, check in a second. The steps that we did is, basically we put our code in their template. We modified the bicep to do only what we wanted it to do. We then, after I failed the deployment, had to notice that I didn't change the Azure YAML. The Azure YAML file is very, very important, as you can tell, because it's what's telling it what it needs to do, and especially what it needs to deploy. And that was basically all I needed to do to get AZD to deploy it for me. Where looking at Azure DevOps Starter, if I would have gotten my code attached to it, I could get it to deploy it to the target that it wanted, but I didn't have any control over the bicep stuff. So, I mean, this is really going to be useful for me, honestly. It's going to be useful for demos and POCs with customers.
Yeah, I totally
It's going to be really useful for that. We're currently building, so this is going to take a while. Let's see where we're at in the presentation. We'll come check on that. So this is kind of the slide that sums up what we're doing. I didn't go through the manual steps of the provision and deploy. That when you've got complicated bicep, you're going to need to do that. You're going to make sure that everything gets provisioned correctly. And then whenever you've got the resources out there and you're doing the proper deployments, you're probably going to need to deploy a time or two. So you'll need to use the individual commands. Yeah, I missed step 3. Didn't make it very far. This is the folder structure that you kind of need. You don't need to do the dev container. If you want to do the actions, you're going to need the GitHub. I don't believe you're going to need the VS Code unless you're using the tool. You don't need the assets unless you're doing the README file. Infrastructure is going to be needed if you want to deploy stuff. And then, of course, you want to do the source and the Azure Yaml. That's the that was the gist of what we needed to do. So the build failed again, but let's see if it deployed. All right, so it didn't deploy. I just messed up. I didn't clean out all the stuff I needed to clean out. So apologize for that bad demo. So here are the resources. I will make this slide deck available as a PDF off of the meetup page, so that you can actually utilize these links. The link to my GitHub template is this last one. If you're interested in the web app calling the VNet integration, there's also this, which I'll upload this video after I chop off the first 15 or 20 minutes to this. This is a YouTube playlist that I've put together of any of the videos I find on YouTube for the developer CLI. So a lot of them are different demos, announcements for the application or the utility. So are any questions?
Thank you for putting this up together, Jason.
Oh, yeah,
I know it's a lot of.
I had pretty bad luck with the demos, unfortunately. But
Does Microsoft see this as a tool to deploy to any other targets? Like I'm assuming this is just for Azure, right? That there's no plan for this tool to be used. So this is aimed at
being used for Azure.
at the .NET developers or other developers deploying to
That's
Azure PaaS services.
so I do know they want to get Terraform as a language of use for this, for the resources, but I don't know what that means for non-Azure stuff. But to be able to put your stuff in Azure, I think it would work well. I don't know that they'll ever do multi-cloud.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. We're altruistic these days, but there are limits.
So what about Terraform? That's interesting because I mean I always think about Terraform. This tool is a little bit like Terraform in that Terraform deploys to Azure. So with this call Terraform, would this work with your Terraform?
No.
I don't see like the advantage, right? You just use Terraform. You can have Terraform files that.
But for myself, who's never used it before,
Yeah.
it'd be a good learning tool.
Yeah. Or I mean, maybe I don't know. If you were a Terraform shop, but you wanted to run AZD commands, I could see a Terraform provided for this. So I would use Terraform to deploy AZD, not vice versa.
Yeah, the reverse, yes.
It's just kind of be like lining up two tools that are similar, but I guess there's probably someone out there that wants to do it.
Yeah, Jason's mainly an Azure shop. So I don't see him.
Only Azure's.
Yeah, that's what I said. I don't see him learning Terraform.
I also don't see.
Actually, you might need to.
I would learn Terraform. I don't see me doing Amazon or Google.
No, but Terraform is not only Amazon. It's also where you have like OpenShift and where you're getting a monolith application like on Linux.
Let me rephrase that. I don't see me doing anything other than Azure.
No, hang on. But
hang-
when you're doing a lift and shift or like breaking a monolith on Linux or something like that and bringing them into Azure, they might have the stuff already done in Terraform.
But it's getting to be very popular. I do know a lot of people who have put quite a bit of time in getting up to speed with Terraform, but oftentimes it gets shelved. All right. Well, anyways, that's my presentation for the evening. Please reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you, Jason, again.
Thanks for everyone for attending. Thanks.
You can have virtual pizzas here. We just need to figure out how Microsoft can transmit over the wire.
Thanks, Mike or Mark, for watching the lobby for me.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate your answers.
My
Even though
pleasure.
you're in Boston and you didn't even make it here this evening.
Yeah, and thanks for the team members for joining.
Yes, but I'm literally in Boston.
Oh, okay.
I'm a long way. I'm in Jamaica Plain, so it's a non-trivial.
Oh, yeah, no, getting to that freeway
Faster getting
is
out.
not, you're right, non-trivial, especially this
Right.
time.
Yep. So. All right. Good night, everyone.